On today's show, Amen Thompson's Houston Rockets season in review, expectations coming into his rookie year, how he adjusted and adapted to different roles over the course of the season and grew, different questions that we still have about Amen Thompson moving forward, as well as one game, one play, and one number from his campaign. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And as always, thank you so much for being an everydayer. Thank you for listening to the show, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making the show part of your day every single day. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, the Podfather himself, Rockets Wire editor and host of the Logger Line podcast, Ben DuBose. You can track down on Twitter at Ben DuBose. Here to break down and review Amen Thompson's rookie season with the Houston Rockets. And Ben, as we kind of start these off, we tend to go, first kind of with the expectations on these players coming into the year. And I think that my expectations for Amen Thompson were not met in the sense that I think that his role was so drastically different for this Rockets team that I feel like anybody could have expected coming into the year with what we knew about him, his entire draft profile. We thought that he was going to be, a guy that was going to handle the basketball quite a bit, have a lot of responsibility probably within the offense. And Ime Udoka took one look at him and very early on, he was like, you know what, let's change gears here a little bit. We're going to put you off ball. We're going to stick you in the dunker spot. We're going to play you as a pseudo wing all season long. And Amen excelled in that role, which I think is really beneficial to his just overall development. The fact that he was able to adapt and change on the fly so quickly, being able to be inserted into the starting lineup. Just, again, I think that coming in, I had a very different set of expectations for how he would impact this Rockets team. And he wound up still impacting the team at a very, very high level, but just in a completely different way than I think me or many others would have imagined coming into the year.
Perhaps we should have seen it coming because the one summer league game that he played, and it wasn't even complete because he got injured at the tail end of that opener against Portland. But I was struck by just how much Tari, Eason, and Jabari Smith Jr. were initiating the offense in that game. It felt like Amen, even though he was playing well, for whatever reason, the Rockets were playing him off the ball a little bit more and getting it to him, as the second or third guy in an offensive set. And I found it curious at the time, but because it was just one game, we never got to see a larger sample as the year progressed and we got to the regular season. I think we saw why, which is that his handle is still not where it needs to be a full-time point guard in the NBA. So the signs were there all along. It's just the sample was so small that I think we brushed it aside going into the season when perhaps we should have questioned it a bit more and probably would have if the summer league sample was larger. But by and large, look, it was a very good year for him, even if the role was different. What I keep coming back to when I think of rookie year Amen Thompson, I went in very excited about the ceiling, but a little worried about the floor. And I came out almost the reverse. A few more questions as to the ceiling, or at least the likelihood of hitting the very high end outcomes. But I am much, much more excited about the floor of Amen Thompson because first I'll address the ceiling. I think simply when you add another if to the equation, that being not only the jump shot, which we knew going in, but now the handle as well, then that does add just a little more doubt to the equation. Because when we talk about the high end outcome that, if everything clicks, then we know he could theoretically be like a Magic Johnson level generational point guard prospect if everything clicks. And now it's not that you should panic over anything after year one, but when you're adding not just the jump shot concern, but you're adding the handle to it, then sure, there's a little bit more concerned as to the super high-end outcome. But I think what I saw out of Amen Thompson's rookie year was his ability to make an impact in so many areas of the game to where it's hard to imagine him not being a winning player in the NBA. Quite frankly, he already is. Offensively, his ability to play off the ball, even without a jump shot, simply because, as you mentioned, his ability to play at the dunker slot. Within just a few games, he was able to figure out an ability to impact the game at a high level through setting screens and making plays on the short roll as a playmaker and even operating as a lob threat at times. His ability, I knew I had to set you up for that one, man. His ability to make an impact in so many ways. And then defensively, I'm sure some will say, well, he's a 6'7" athlete. Why wouldn't you expect him to be an impact defensive player? In a one-on-one setting, yes, but defense in the current NBA is about much more than athletic tools in a one-on-one situation. It's about the team construct. And even if he's still developing some of his guard skills offensively, the fact that he sees the floor like a point guard on defense is so helpful, because in the team construct, it feels like he's oftentimes 1 or 2 steps ahead. So it's not just what he can do individually, being able to switch 1 through 5, guard anyone on the floor, but because he anticipates so well, he's very good in a team construct. Of course, the Rockets and Ime Udoka like to switch a lot, if not 1 through 4, at times 1 through 5. And that's just so useful. And it's so rare for a rookie at 21 years old to be advanced enough to do the little things, to talk, to communicate, to anticipate, all the things that make him not only a good defender in a one-on-one construct, but on a team level as well. And I feel so much better about that, because going into the year, there was always going to be some concern that if the jump shot doesn't come along, and defensively, the tools are there, but there's questions as with any young player as to how it's going to translate in the team construct. Are there going to be situations where he can be schemed off the floor by opposing coaches? By the end of the year, I think the answer was pretty clearly no. And so even if there are a little more questions as to the super high-end outcomes, now not only does the jump shot need to come along, but there's some work that needs to be done on the handle as well. To me, the floor scenario, specifically when it comes to defense and operating off ball offensively, the floor scenarios are just much, much higher. And on balance, the magnitude of that increase to the floor is much greater than any decrease to the ceiling. So with all that considered, I look at it as a very, very encouraging year.
We're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of those questions, as well as some of the growth that we still want to see out of Amen Thompson moving forward, as well as we've got to get to our 1 game, 1 play, and 1 number from his rookie season. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Moms are a gift, so get her the best this Mother's Day. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to different self-care essentials and so much more, delivered right to her doorstep. Look, Mother's Day, it's an important holiday, right? You got to celebrate mom on her special day. And you might have some really awesome plans to go out and do a big family lunch or a nice dinner, and that's great. But what better way to surprise mom than to have a gift waiting for her on her doorstep the moment that she wakes up? Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place on DoorDash and get 50% off of your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn, because look, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many different hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire right now. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Talking Amen Thompson right now, reflecting on his rookie season. And Ben, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there at a couple points in segment 1, talking about some of the areas of growth, some of the questions that we still have for Amen Thompson. And I feel very similarly as you do about how high his floor is now as a player, now that we've seen him kind of, in action as this, off ball kind of pseudo wing type role. And I wonder, if Amen Thompson, obviously the high end, super high end outcome is, a Magic Johnson type, with the shot, all that. But I do wonder right now, when you look at Amen's skill set, which trait is the more important one to work on, whether it be his ball handling or his shooting. I feel like the shooting is the easy cop-out answer, but in a weird way, like if he elevates his ability as a primary ball handler. I feel like his upper echelon outcome, it's obviously going to be very dependent on whether or not he gets the shot, long term. But I think that's going to unlock more for him in the here and now than just the shooting will alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I also think that the ball handling is something that you can get answers to during the offseason. So perhaps it makes more sense to use that as an immediate focal point. The shooting is something that we know for years he's going to be working on that with Ben Sullivan, and hopefully there's a slow and steady progression. But in terms of the offseason work, it's almost become a meme on Rockets Twitter. How many off-season articles have there been praising Jae'Sean Tate's work as a shooter, to where every August or September, this is the year that Jae'Sean becomes a 35 to 40% three-point guy, that he can make all these out of the corner. And then in the game situation, it's totally different, because the shots you get over the offseason, they're just totally different as compared to the quality of looks you get in an NBA game when everyone is dialed in. In the offseason, people might be competing hard individually, but in terms of how it translates to a game, it's totally different when guys are bought in 1 through 5, and it goes back to defending at a team level, which is something that with the men on the defensive side is really encouraging, as we talked about earlier in this pod. So with the shooting, even if there are some strides, there's always going to be some questions as to just how it translates. As opposed to the handle, that's one thing that there are some differences, but I don't think the offseason gym runs, the unofficial team practices that they have, and then leading into training camp, I honestly don't think that weakness is going to be all that different, if it exists, in the offseason compared to NBA games, because it just comes down to, look, if somebody picks you up 94 feet, is that handle going to translate? When he's driving to the rim and guys are trying to poke the ball out, is he able to retain possession or not? Unlike shooting, where the quality of looks can vary a ton from the offseason and those formats to a regular season NBA game, I don't think that the jump from what you do in the offseason to a real game with regards to the handle is nearly as severe in terms of the difference. So I would say the ball handling, it does unlock a few other layers to his game. It would help the Rockets planning their depth chart as well, in terms of, do you have an option you can trust behind Fred VanVleet? And I also think it's something that, look, if Amen looks better this offseason than he did last offseason, I think even before training camp, he'll go in and the Rockets will go in feeling a bit better about that. Because again, I go back to the one summer league game a year ago. I think when you look at the clues, I think it's pretty clear that the Rockets already knew that was a weakness for him, at least relative to the scouting reports, based on how they used him in that summer league opener. And so perhaps he's able to show something different this summer that gives them a lot more hope heading into training camp about his point guard potential.
When we talk about, different floor level scenarios for Amen Thompson, I think if you just look at one where he, elevates the handle just a little bit, whatever, but the shooting never comes to fruition, he's basically Ben Simmons, and arguably a better version of Ben Simmons at this point. And then if you do get the shooting to increase a little bit, still not like a great three-point shooter, a great outside shooter, but at least keep the defense honest, then we're looking at almost even more like a kind of like an Andre Iguodala type a little bit, right? Where, kind of a point forward wing that can do a little bit of everything offensively, a defensive ace type presence. And those are really great floor level outcomes for Amen Thompson. The fact that we're talking about that possibly being like his basement is really incredible after his rookie season. There was some debate to this, as the season progressed. But I think, we can probably safely say this now here at season's end and kind of reflecting on his rookie year. It feels like Amen's already the best defensive player on the Rockets. I think that coming in, Dillon Brooks had that edge. He was going to be the Rockets' defensive ace, their defensive stopper. But even by the end of the season, I had games where I felt more confident about Amen Thompson in a certain matchup, like for example, playing against the OKC Thunder and guarding SGA, right? I felt better about Amen Thompson in those specific matchups guarding the opposing team's best player than I did about Dillon Brooks doing it.
Also think that he's probably your most switchable guy, and especially without Tari Eason, because I do think there are limits to some of your other more veteran defenders, because there are more questions with regards to their lateral quickness and their explosion, just how 1 through 5 they are. As opposed to Amen Thompson, he truly is 1 through 5. It's very hard, other than, I guess, Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, these just extreme matchups at center. There are very few guys that I don't think Amen can handle on a given possession. And I think that's just so valuable.
Did you see the way that OG Anunoby guarded Embiid in closing him out in the fourth quarter? So I think Amen Thompson might be capable of that down the line.
Maybe. Although that's a limited Joel Embiid by injury. But yeah, it feels like that's the case every single year with him. Yeah, I just think that Amen's defense, the versatility is something that no one else on this roster has. And then you combine that with an IQ that is so advanced for a rookie. That's the upside. I feel like a lot of the dialogue with Amen has been about, look, he's not a point guard yet. That's true because of the handle and to a lesser extent, the jump shot. But the IQ is there, and I want to make sure that doesn't get lost. You see that defensively. I mentioned earlier that he has point guard skills on defense, and what I mean by that is you can see how well he anticipates, how he reads things. That translates offensively as well, and he had some brilliant passes. It's just the handle is not there yet to where he can be a full-time point guard or even a full-time backup, at least as Ime Udoka saw it for most of this year. But the fact that the vision, the processing, that it is there, that's important because that makes the bar pretty low. It's not like he has to become one of the best handle guys in the league. No, it just needs to become functional. And that's something that, again, a very low baseline. I do think you'll be able to tell through the offseason if he can hold his own against guys when they're trying to pressure him 94 feet. If he can not have the ball poked out when he's trying to go to the rim, then that can meet the low bar. And it's a very low bar because of how advanced he is at all the other things and the mental side of the game, which is just so rare for a guy who's 21 years old in year one.
I wonder too, thinking about just the way that the Rockets deployed him, I wonder how much that had to do ultimately with Amen being a non-shooter and playing, a handful of other non-shooters at various points throughout the season. Obviously, the biggest culprit being Alperen Sengun, right? He's clearly your best player this past season, but one of his deficiencies this past season was his lack of outside shooting, right? He actually regressed when it came to his outside shooting this past season. So I wonder if some of the ways that they felt they needed to play Amen Thompson was because of having Sengun out there on the floor, or just specific, like I feel like they could have gotten away with giving him more on-ball reps this year than they did, but ultimately they decided, you know what, we're just going to have him focus on this new role that we have for him, stay in your lane, play off-ball, and get really good at this, and we'll grow the on-ball reps later on. It didn't feel like it was, an important task for them to accomplish this year.
Yeah, and obviously the Sengun injury played into it as well in terms of how he was used the last 20 games because you need to fill that gaping Sengun hole in a way that Jock Landale and Jeff Green would not have been able to do. Another little factor that I would point to is the emergence of Aaron Holiday. The Rockets prioritized three-point shooting increasingly as the season progressed. After the All-Star break, they wanted to get up 40-plus per game, and Aaron was one of your best high-volume three-point shooters, nearly 40%. And he's a guy who does handle the ball in that role off the bench. I know you can point to Reggie Bullock Jr. as well, but Bullock was just a train wreck defensively in a way that Aaron Holiday was not. So I think because they needed more three-point shooting and more on-ball defense, then they did need to carve out 20 minutes per game for Aaron Holiday for this team to maximize its potential, to maximize that model. And so because of that, since you need to play Aaron, that it made sense for him to get those non-Fred at least initial on-ball reps when it came to setting up the offense and then using them in a little bit more in an off-ball capacity.
It was basically, a triumvirate of Fred, Jalen, and, Aaron Holiday kind of handling the basketball for the majority of the game. Obviously, then, once they initiated their half-court sets, then Alperen Sengun would get involved, all that. But those were your primary ball handlers. And again, shout out to Aaron Holiday for being able to. Yeah. I feel like this Rocket season would have looked a lot different had the Amen Thompson injury not happened early on, because those first handful of games right out of the gate with Amen Thompson, it looked a little rough. Because they were trying to use him as the backup point guard early on, and Aaron Holiday wasn't in the rotation at that point in time. And we could see some of the clunkiness. We could see some of the the bumps and bruises and trying to make that lineup work. Also factoring in Jae'Sean Tate into the rotation early on this season. Having that many non-shooters was a bit of a problem for Ime. So as soon as Amen Thompson goes down due to injury, up next Aaron Holiday, and he just slotted in beautifully with his skill set.
I would also point out that I think the combination of Amen Thompson and Alperen Sengun, I know there's been a lot made of, well, can you play two non-shooters? And especially if they're both starters, then it does become a bit more challenging. I won't say it's impossible because both those guys are extraordinarily high IQ. But I think when Amen came back from the ankle injury, especially in December and January, we saw a lot of synergies between Sengun and Amen, with Sengun finding him on these off-ball cuts. And I think that was very important to building Amen's confidence because, as you mentioned, his rookie season, those first 4 games before the ankle sprain, did not start very well. And so I think using him in an off-ball capacity, having Sengun feed him and play to his strengths at that time, that was a big part of sort of slowly building his confidence. And then as the year progressed, and unfortunately after Sengun got hurt, then the Rockets gradually built him up into larger and better roles. But I do think using him off ball and having Sengun reward him as probably the best playmaker and passer on the team, that was a big part of sort of building up his confidence and getting him to a point where as the year progressed, he was ready for starters level minutes.
I'm glad you chose to dispel that notion that those two guys can't coexist on the court together. I've always explained here on the show and on social media, whatever, non-shooters can absolutely coexist on the floor. What it does, though, is it puts a lot more pressure on the other guys who are supposed to be the floor spacers, who are supposed to be the shooters in those lineups, right? We see the Sacramento Kings actually do it now. Granted, De'Aaron Fox is a much improved outside shooter over the course of his career, especially these last 2 years with this new kind of Kings model with Sabonis in tow and all that. But Sabonis is not a shooter. Fox is really not a consistent high volume outside shooter, at least, not really, based on the scouting report, but the Kings place 3 other elite shooters around those guys to open up their offense. And I do think that is a model that the Rockets could follow a little bit if you want to one day have Amen Thompson and Alperen Sengun in your starting lineup. If neither of them ever get to a point where the 3-point shot is a legitimate threat, where you're going to be running them off the 3-point line, like, 34, 35% plus, then I do think you can kind of buoy that offense by having 3 elite shooters around them. But again, that puts a lot more pressure on Fred, on Jalen, on Jabari, on whoever else is in that starting lineup with them to be 37, 38% plus 3-point shooters to really force the defense to pick their poison between, okay, are you going to let them, cook us with the Amen Thompson, Alperen Sengun 2-man game, or are you going to send double teams and then leave open shooters? And that's why the NBA is all about chess matches. It's all about, counters on counters and trying to figure out how you're going to scheme against a certain team.
It's a fair question. And would I feel better if one of those guys developed a 3-point shot? Of course. And I think Sengun is closer than Amen. So if somebody's going to take a leap between now and the start of next season from 3-point range, I think it's more likely to be Sengun. That's why I think it's a better focal point in the very short term for Amen to improve the handle. The shot, guys are always going to put up shots, but that can be gradual. I don't think that has to be solved by the start of next season in order for him to be impactful. So yeah, would I feel better if at least one of those guys can develop a consistent 3-point shot to where they're respected from a spacing perspective on the floor? Of course. But I think it's a mistake to say that it has to happen, because beyond the points that you made in terms of surrounding them with 3 shooters, those guys are both so extraordinarily high IQ with Amen and Sengun. It would be a mistake to say that it can't work. You have to at least keep your mind open to the possibility that they can figure it out.
And that's the other part is I forgot to include it. When you have guys like that are that high IQ and that can both pass, right? You don't have to be a shooter to provide floor spacing. Passing can provide floor spacing. Cutting can provide floor spacing. You can open things up offensively by going through. It's a little bit more complicated. It's not as easy as just telling a player, hey, go park your ass on the 3-point line and stay there. And that's how we're going to get our spacing. You have to have a little bit more movement. You have to have a little bit more creativity offensively, which if there's one, blemish maybe on this past season, is that the Rockets offense at times was very vanilla, very basic, although Ime Udoka did talk about that in, at the offseason
to an extent.
By design, he tried to keep things simple. I do think that was a bit detrimental at times this season, where it felt like the Rockets offense was very bland. So hopefully a little bit more creativity coming down the pipeline for the Rockets coaching staff. But coming up, we're going to get into our 1 game, 1 play, 1 number from Amen Thompson's season, as well as his overall season grade. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get your hands on. Unique stickers that you can trade with a friend to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or take their vaults full of riches. Plus, in Monopoly Go, it feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and different challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames, like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play Store or the App Store. Again, go download Monopoly Go, free on the Google Play Store or the App Store. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Ben, it is arguably my favorite part of these review episodes that we do, where we discuss one game, one play, one number from this player's season. So in this case, Amen Thompson. So hit us with your one game from Amen Thompson's season.
I'm pretty sure we're not going to pick the same game because this was not an overwhelming statistical one for Amen, but it was March 16th against Cleveland. He had 18 points, 8 rebounds, 8 of 11 shooting. What stood out for me was the performance in a team concept. The Rockets destroyed a Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen-led Cavaliers team that ended up being the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And think back to how you felt going into that game. So that was a Saturday afternoon game. The Sunday of that week was the Sengun injury in Sacramento, which fortunately was not as bad as we initially feared, but it did end his season. And so the Rockets were starting to play well at that time. And a lot of us went into that week feeling pretty bummed that finally the Rockets were playing good ball. They felt like they were right on the cusp of doing something special and giving us the sort of sustained run that would make us feel better about this team going into next year. And then all of a sudden their best player, goes out injured. And then the Tuesday game after that, they play at San Antonio, and that's the first game of the post-Sengun era, and the offense is very ragged. They win that game, but they have to really survive. Thursday against the Wizards, it looks good, but that's the Wizards. They're terrible. They have one of the worst defenses in NBA history. And then Saturday against a good Cleveland Cavaliers team, for the Rockets to go out and destroy them, that was the midpoint of the 11-game streak. That was when it opened my eyes to the idea that, hey, they've actually figured something out here. They can make a real run at this. And what stood out to me about that game, while he was not the high scorer, so the Cavaliers had a true center on the floor for everything but garbage time. Between Jarrett Allen and Tristan Thompson, they played over 40 minutes combined. And it looked like to me they had no idea what to do with Amen Thompson and the way the Rockets and Ime Udoka used him off ball, both as a screener, as a lob threat, and out of the dunker slot. There's just so many different ways that the Rockets were able to use Amen Thompson, and it felt like those traditional bigs for the Cavaliers just didn't have an answer. They didn't know what to do. And, to some extent, whenever a team makes a change on the fly, the way the Rockets did to their scheme, then that works in the short term to the benefit. But the fact that the Rockets against a good team were able to look that strong with the men at the 5, that's what opened my eyes to the fact that, hey, this isn't just the Rockets winning a few games in a row because they played bad teams. No, they've actually figured something out. This is a legitimately good basketball team. And so using Amen in that capacity, and we heard Ime Udoka say it after the year, all it takes is 1 or 2 games of Amen being used in a new way, and then he's figured it out, and it's on to what's next. And it felt like that Spurs game, the Wizards game, those were sort of him getting used to being used in that capacity, being the screener, making some plays out of the short roll, doing what he needs to do out of the dunker spot. And then by the Cavaliers game, which was the third with the men in the starting lineup in place of Sengun, it felt like, okay, he's figured it out. This is how he needs to play. And bam, the Rockets offense just hit a new level that they were not at for most of this year. So I would say because of what happened at the team level, that Rockets Cavaliers game, that's the one that stands out to me.
If memory serves too, I think he was making some plays in that Wizards game where he had some turnovers out of the short roll, right? Where you could see he was figuring things out. He was trying to understand, okay, how do I work on my timing here? How do I read this? How do I attack or pass out of the short roll? And then it kind of started to all click together, like you said, in that Cavs game. I love that. That's a great pick. I'm going to go with potentially some low-hanging fruit here, but it just hello. Well, that's incredible production value. Alarm going off in the middle of the show. All right.
Yeah, I had my dog barking in the last segment, so we're all good.
Hey, it's all good, man. Stuff happens. All right. So I want to give honorable mention to that game, the first game of the Rockets 11-game win streak against the Blazers, because that was that game where second half Rockets were playing really raggedy. Jalen Green had the steal and the poster dunk on Anthony Simons, and that kind of ignited the Rockets' run. But it was a combination of Jalen Green and Amen Thompson there in that third quarter that sparked that comeback in a big way. Amen Thompson locking in defensively. He had some really impressive plays offensively as well. Some strong finishes in and around the rim. So that could have been one, but I'm going to go with the OKC game. That was still easily, I think, the game of the year for the Rockets. I think it was Jalen's best game of the year. And then when you look at who was the Robin in that game to Jalen Green's Batman, it was Amen Thompson. Jalen Green posted 37 in that game, and he came up with big shot after big shot after big shot down the stretch of that one to pull out the win. But Amen Thompson was right there as well with 25 points and 15 rebounds, career highs on both sides. And I think there was that one play where the Rockets were down, I believe 5, and it was the broken play where
that's my best play, by the way.
Your best play, yeah. So and that play, I think, really kind of signified and showed just, okay, here's Amen Thompson. He's ready for this stage. He's ready for this level. And he's here, helping Jalen Green. Like somebody needed to step up in that game to help Jalen Green drag the Rockets over the finish line. And that was Amen Thompson right there. Not just in that moment in particular, but over the course of the game, his defense guarding J-Dub. Obviously, yes, the caveat, there was no Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in that game, but that was still a very, very good OKC team without their best player. So that was probably my game of the year for Amen Thompson, just seeing the way in which we become accustomed to, right? Just how active he is on the glass, defensively, how switchable he is, how he's able to lock down the opposing team's best player, just kind of everything from that one game, as well as the insane shot making and that one clutch moment in particular. So that's my one game for Amen Thompson. Hit us.
We can move on to. Yeah, I guess we can move on to best play since you already talked about it. But to me, definitely they needed that play to win that game. They were down 5 with about 90 seconds to go. Dylan Brooks had airballed a 3. I believe it was Dillon. And if they didn't score that possession, it was pretty much over. And Amen got both the offensive rebound and then dribbled his way into a mid-range shot that brought the Rockets back within a possession and set them up for that closing kick. And we know the heroics that Jalen had from that point forward. But I do think that beyond just a clutch play in that game, it showed that there was growth as a shooter from Amen during his rookie season, and that's a question. It didn't come from three-point range, at least not in a game just yet, but we noticed, I think, from the mid-range, he got more comfortable taking those shots, not just when they came to him, but creating a little bit off the dribble as well.
Dribbling into some pull-ups occasionally,
Yeah, and so even if the three-point shot isn't there, just his ability to dribble into a mid-range shot and make the defense respect that possibility, that is important. And I also think that along those same lines, his free throw shooting improved as his rookie year progressed. From, I believe, January 1st onward, he was above 70%. And that's about the same area of the floor. I mean, I know a stationary free throw, it's not the same as a pull-up for mid-range, but I do think it's a similar area that he's working on. And I think it reflects the fact that there is some growth. It's easy to say, well, the three-point shooting, it just wasn't there the whole year. No, I do think there was some improvement from the mid-range areas, the free throw line, and that shows you that there is some payoff, even if the ultimate one that we want down the line isn't there just yet.
For me, so that was your one play, right? That moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think it was reflective of the broader trend.
For sure. No, it makes sense. I went also with a play against the Thunder, but not from this game, not from the big Thunder win. It was their home game against the Thunder. I believe it was in February, if I'm not mistaken. February, January. It was a home game against the Thunder.
There were 2 games at the end of February, right after the All-Star break. One in Houston, other in OKC.
There you go. Yeah. So this was the one in Houston, and I think this play was kind of an encapsulation of just how I think we can envision Amen Thompson impacting a game, down the line in his career, but. He was defending Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. SGA drives to the rim. He blocks SGA at the rim, right? That's a tough thing to do. SGA is an incredibly talented finisher. He's great at, foul baiting, all that. So not only does he block SGA at the rim, that's step one on this roller coaster of a play. He recovers his own block shot, right? That's already tough to do, is to block shot and then maintain possession and control of the ball. Takes off in transition, runs the fast break beautifully, and then dishes the ball on the left wing to Cam Whitmore, who goes slicing in for an easy dunk in transition. And that, to me, was just, that's what Amen Thompson does, right? He's a wrecking ball defensively. He stopped their best player, blocked a shot, recovered the ball, ran the break, and then dimed up a teammate for an easy bucket. Like, that is what I think Amen Thompson is at his core. And who he's going to be as an NBA player is somebody who gets defensive stops and then tees players up offensively, or at points, just takes it himself. There were definitely a couple plays that I was looking at. He had one against the Wizards, I think it was, where he drove like full court, like coast to coast. I think it might have been after a made basket. I could be wrong, but coast to coast, and then finished over like 3 defenders, like just elevated and dunked through like 3 Wizards defenders. And I was like, this looked a little, I don't know, like LeBron-esque, the way that he was able to just drive and ignore the defense and elevate and finish at the rim. Not saying he's LeBron, but just, some of the physical similarities as far as the athleticism, the finishing, all that. But that's going to be my one play, is just because I really thought that the defense was so spectacular from Amen Thompson this year that I had to pick something that highlighted that, and it kind of expressed what he was good at all season long, which I think that play does that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess we can finish out with best, what is it? Best number?
One number.
Okay, one number. I couldn't think of it.
The number can be bad, so.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, that one's pretty easy. Plus 7.3. That's the net rating of Amen Thompson after the All-Star break. We know that was when the formula changed for this team. And no, it wasn't just about Alperen Sengun being hurt and playing differently at that time. No, the Rockets were fundamentally a different team, really, ever since they had that week-long break. They came out with emphasis on shooting 40-plus threes per game, and they were already playing much better prior to the Sengun injury. It's just that initial schedule out of the break was so difficult, including those 2 Thunder games that you just pointed to, that the team results didn't show up until the schedule softened a little bit in March, and you could see that they had figured something out. And in that post-All-Star game stretch, again, plus 7.3 net rating, that was by far the best of any Rockets player who averaged at least 20 minutes per game. And to no surprise, he was also the best in defensive rating as well over that stretch. To me, that hits home the key theme of rookie year Amen Thompson, which is that he is already a winning player. In some respects, he's a very useful hedge, a very useful contrast to a lot of other young prospects that are and have been on this team the last few years, because it feels like, with so many guys of the young core, especially when you think back to their rookie and sophomore seasons, there's a lot of flash, there's a lot of moments of brilliance. But the question is, and to some extent with guys like Jalen Green, it's still there, just how translatable it's going to be to a winning environment. Can they raise the floor enough to always make an impact, even when the highlight plays aren't there? With Amen Thompson, the flash, certainly it's there at times, but for him to truly get to that Magic Johnson level outcome, then, that's at the very, upper 5% of outcomes, given his skill set, then yeah, the handle's got to improve. The 3-point shooting's got to improve. We know this. But the fact is, he is already, even as a 21-year-old rookie, making a clear impact on winning, even when the handle isn't there, even if the jump shot isn't there. He already does so many other things that contribute at a team level that I think it's a perfect pairing for this team in particular, where the Rockets have taken a lot of big swings with their high draft picks the last few years, and some of them are starting to pay off as they get into year 3, year 4, and hopefully they pay off even more next year. But I think it's very useful to have a guy like Amen Thompson who makes an impact on the game no matter what. I think it was there all year, but especially since the All-Star break, when his role in minutes got scaled up and the team took it to another level as well, not just in terms of their offense, but just overall team play. We saw that in the record. The fact that he directly contributed to wins over that time period as a rookie, that speaks so highly to the type of player that he is. And so that's the number that resonated with me.
My number is 17. Can you guess what 17 is in reference to?
Number of starts?
No, yes. So I'll give it to you. It was 17 games as a starter after Sengun went down due to injury.
Right.
He technically started a few more games than that, but it was a stretch of 17 after the Sengun injury. And
Fred had a couple of maintenance games. Yeah, you're right.
So, but in that stretch of 17 games after Sengun went down due to injury, so again, as a consistent starter with a new, clearly defined role, having to step in place of Alperen Sengun, he averaged 13.9 points, 9.2 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and 1.4 steals in 29 and a half minutes played on 62% true shooting. And here's the kicker. Here's the real big number for me out of this group of numbers. Only an 18.1% usage rating. I think there's a model that we've seen in effect with a guy that the Rockets fans should be regrettably familiar with, but Russell Westbrook, right? As far as an upper end outcome for even if he doesn't ever get the shot to a consistent place of just put the ball in his hands and let him go to work and let him get downhill, right? 4 shooters around him, let him get downhill. That was the Russell Westbrook formula. And the fact that we saw him put those numbers up with such a minimal usage rating, I want to highlight here, Scoot Henderson for the season averaged 14 points, 3.1 rebounds, and 5.4 assists, and he had like a 26.5% usage rating. So think about what Amen Thompson could do if he was given more reps with the ball in his hands, more reps as like the primary option. If you airdropped Amen Thompson onto a team like the Blazers or the Hornets or whatever, he was clearly just, the team was going to be bad and you were just going to put the ball in his hands and let him go to work, I feel like he could have averaged, 20, 25 a night on arguably still really good efficiency because he's going to get downhill a lot. He's going to finish around the rim a lot. So I just wanted to highlight that because I do think that you can play the game where you look at, a rookie's numbers or a player who's playing, in a smaller role and then try to do like the per 36 and try and extrapolate like, okay, what is this going to look like if we scale up his usage or whatever. But we already have a really solid, like almost quarter season sample of what Amen Thompson in a much bigger role looks like, right? 30 minutes a night is nothing to turn your nose up at. So I thought that number really stood out to me. And one of the questions that we didn't really get to earlier, but it's kind of been a question, when we talked about Tari, Eason. It's the question when we talk about Amen Thompson. How are the Rockets going to get minutes for these guys next season? Because when they have a fully fleshed out rotation, when everybody's healthy, Ime Udoka is going to have his work cut out for him, kind of picking and choosing almost on a game to game, night to night basis. Who are my best 5 guys to close out this game, right? Because it almost feels like when Tari Eason's healthy, like you need to try and get him 30 plus a night. It feels like with the impact that Amen Thompson has, you would be sabotaging yourself if you didn't get him 30 plus minutes a night because of his impact defensively, his impact on the glass, his overall defense, guarding the opposing team's best players. So I'm very curious to see how Ime Udoka ultimately balances all that, but that's why I wanted to highlight that number because it's really our first glimpse into Amen Thompson as a starting level player, and his production was, really, really impressive in that short sample. That brings us to our season grade. Now, we hashed out a lot of stuff about Amen Thompson in this episode. We'll keep the season grade short and sweet. Ben, how would you grade his season?
I would say B+, and the only thing keeping it from an A would be the overall number of games, because he did suffer at least 2, maybe 3 ankle sprains, the one in summer league, the one early in the season, and then he had a minor one towards the very end, although he only missed 1 game with that one. So whenever you have repeat ankle injuries with a guy of his level of explosion, it's something that you always have to monitor. I mean, it sort of defines Steph Curry's initial years in the NBA as well. Not saying based on 1 year you should panic, but the fact that he did have repeat issues and the fact that his game is very dependent on that explosion, it's not a major concern, but it's something that I am keeping a little bit of a watchful eye on in terms of his durability moving forward, and hopefully he's able to have a healthy season next year. So I do dock him a little bit in terms of the final grade that he did have that 20 game or so absence. But aside from that, I think he did everything you could reasonably expect as a rookie. I know the jump shot still needs work, the handle still needs work, but when you look at the overall numbers, the totality of his impact and what it means to winning, yeah, I would say an A when he plays, and then I would lower that to a B+ simply based on the durability question.
Yeah, I think I have to give him just a flat out A. It's so rare for rookies, and the fact that the Rockets had not 1 but 2 rookies come in and able to carve out legitimate rotation minutes and be impactful winning players as rookies is the important part here. A lot of rookies come in and they are not ready to win at a high level, and these 2
we saw that in Houston the last couple of years.
Yeah. Exactly. So the fact
Tari
that
Eason included.
There you go. Right, Tari Eason's just a different animal. But the fact that they were able to come in and Amen Thompson was able to be as impactful as he was. And I think really the biggest part was just him adjusting to so many different roles on the fly, right? Obviously, the Rockets kind of looked like they were going to try to use him as a ball handler early on. That didn't work out. He gets injured. They bring him back. They're like, okay, well, we found a recipe for success that's working. How do we now fold you into this success without just bringing you back and saying, okay, take over the backup point guard duties, because clearly that's working with Aaron. We want to keep him in the mix. We need his shooting. They slide him over to the wing position, right? And he starts playing out of the dunker spot and starts, all these backdoor cuts and playing off ball. And so his ability to, adjust to multiple different roles over the course of the season and be, a winning and impactful player in whatever way the Rockets chose to deploy him, I think speaks volumes about his capabilities as a player, his ability to develop and adjust and do things differently on the fly. So I got to give him a flat out A. But we want to know how you would grade Amen Thompson's season. Let us know in the YouTube comments. We read those every single day. But Ben, the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Yep. Ben DuBose, the Rockets Wire, and the Logger Line on Twitter/X, and rocketswire.usatoday.com for all your daily Houston Rockets news coverage.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're listening via Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review helps us out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.